Hey everybody, welcome to Content Forum's weekly check-in and today's extra special session on communities and content. I'm happy to welcome Luke Zimmer from Skariphos. Thanks for joining us, Luke.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great. And folks, thanks for joining online. We really appreciate you registering and participating today. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the message box, or you can type in the ask a question too. We'll be pausing during the discussion to answer any questions you have, and we'll also have time at the end too. So don't hesitate to jump in with anything. Okay, great. All right, so Luke, I want to start big picture today and just talking about content and communities. I was really interested to read in the Community Roundtable report where they talked about community engagement and empowering individuals and members. It really helps community members not only feel seen, but also heard, because we're providing a forum for them to not only ask questions, but also help people solve problems. So in your experience, can you talk about any examples that you've done or seen clients do where the community interaction really helps identify potential content leaders for the organization?
Yeah. So I think, naturally communities are great for this, like you said. And I apologize, I think I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Hopefully nobody else can hear that, but I'm gonna turn my audio down a little bit. But so yeah, I think communities are great for that in general, just because of the nature of communities. Just like you said, Dina, a lot of organizations are pursuing online communities for the simple fact that it's a clear one-to-one relationship that you're able to build with a potential member using a platform like that. So I've seen that's kind of I've been really lucky in that that's really become my focus, working with associations, and associations are a natural kind of partner when you think about it with online communities. Communities in an online form are just a natural outreach of what associations are doing anyway, in terms of helping connect their members with experts and find information about their industries. So it's kind of, like I said, a natural fit. And when an association decides to establish a community, it really is a commitment to their members and to their members' knowledge, because like we said, we all know that communities don't really work without experts of some kind, but more importantly, they don't work without members asking questions of those experts. And that is the core of what we're trying to get to with a lot of association content. It's what's most important to our members, what's really keeping them up at night. And so, like I said to you, Dina, earlier, I can go on about this for hours if you let me wax poetic about this stuff. So, feel free to stop me and be like, hey, I need concrete examples at some point. But, so one of the really great examples, and one of the first opportunities that I really had to, leverage an online community for its content was my very first association job, which was working for the University Risk Management and Insurance Association. Mm-hmm. They're a small staff association, and at that point in time, I was managing not just their online community, but pretty much all of their communications and marketing. And so a big part of my job was coming up with content for things like our newsletter and our annual journal that we were sending out to members. And, I was new to associations, and I definitely didn't know anything about risk management. And so I relied really heavily on the online community to just direct me in terms of what's important content-wise. What are the things that are going to be most interesting to you, and what's going to catch your eye when we send you a newsletter? What's going to make that newsletter a real benefit to you. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to. I spent a lot of my time just kind of filtering through the content in the community, because it had been going up and running before I had even started at the association. And so there were lots of people in sharing really great feedback, sharing really great questions. And so my first goal was literally just to go through and find what are those like critical questions that are getting, not just quick responses, but also in depth and really nuanced responses.
Mm-hmm.
I after a while I knew a little bit too much about risk management at university. Things about like managing nearly naked miles and all those fun things that college students want to do on campus.
Oh, wow.
How do you make sure that you're insured properly for that kind of stuff? But those were the kinds of questions that were coming up, and I was able to literally just troll through the community to find answers to those things and to find the members who not only knew how to answer those questions, but could answer them really well in an in-depth format that would work well for a newsletter or even a multi-page article for something like our association's journal.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that aspect. I mean, even though it was a funny example of what the members were looking for, I mean, the real world examples are the best, right? I mean, you're trying to get them where they really need the help when they need it.
yeah, and a big part of our job as communicators and as marketers is making these things compelling for our members as well. And it's really when you allow your members to express those, not just like really technical information about the industry, but also express those anecdotes and those stories. It's really goes for really great content in your newsletter and your journal. They're essentially case studies, and other members can identify with those issues that person's going through, and it makes the content then that much more relatable.
Yeah, it's a great example.
So we also, another example at the American Staffing Association, we also used our online community to, and this kind of went both ways in terms of engagement. We always want to get our members engaged in the online community, but a big hurdle to a lot of community managers is getting staff involved in the community as well. And at the American Staffing Association, we worked really hard to leverage our legal team's expertise. Knew that our community members were coming to us for, just regular updates about legislation and things like that the association was lobbying on behalf of members for, and also just legislation that they needed to be aware of, that was going to affect the way that they run their businesses.
Right.
So we, in kind of seeing those questions pop up in the community, we recognized that there was a gap in some of the content that we were providing to members and the way that we were providing it to them. And so we were able to establish what we called the legal line video. And so it was a video that we shared with our community members once a month, and it was about some kind of important legal topic. And it was hugely successful. And even after, since then, I no longer work for the American Staffing Association, but since then, talking to them, they've been able to continue leveraging that legal expertise on staff to really generate content in their community and discussions in their community. So they had, for an example, a newsletter that was going out to individuals who had signed up for legal legislative updates. So it was a private newsletter, and it went out once a month or so from the general counsel, and they were able to expand that newsletter recently. Diana Mertz at the American Staffing Association, she's the genius behind all this. She was able to expand on that newsletter and take it, and instead of being a this private newsletter channel that they were communicating with only a few members, they expanded into an entire category of content. I believe they've even stood up its own community for legal and legislative updates from the staff there. So, there are lots of ways to, to kind of leverage content both ways. So maybe you've got something that you're producing already that, it's a newsletter and it's going out and you're able to see clicks and stuff like that, but maybe you're not able to gather kind of anecdotal evidence about how well it's working. Putting something like that into your online community not only gives you those clicks and those views, but it also gives your members an opportunity to provide feedback. And whether it's positive or negative, it gives you an opportunity to identify new possibilities for the association.
I love that example. I mean, in my experience with clients, and even when I was still working inside in associations, the toughest nut to crack, I feel like, is getting into the legal or advocacy folks' brains and getting the information out of them in a consumable way for the members, because they think so technically, but the information's so rich. But to make it understandable, particularly with the video form, I think is brilliant. Thinking back to that, did you script that out, or was it an interview set up? How did that work?
Yeah, that it was primarily scripted. We were working with the legal team, so they wanted to, they wanted to make sure that everything was exactly right before we put anything on any kind of video. So they definitely scripted all of that stuff. We were able to, bring in other voices though, and so we would always feature the legal counsel as kind of the person in the video, the face in the video. But every now and then we were able to bring in other folks for him to talk to about interesting issues. So it became almost kind of like a talk show format. So there are definitely lots of possibilities that way in terms of creating a scripted format that's short and easy to consume, to creating something really along the lines of the format that we're using now, a real Q&A with folks to get really in-depth answers and to have the opportunity to ask really in-depth questions.
That's great. Okay. Before I jump into another question or you jump into another example, let's just pause for a second. And we have a bunch of folks online. If you guys have any questions of Luke about what he was just talking about, or if you want to jump us to another topic, we're super flexible. So let me know, type something in the chat or post in the ask a question, and we'll just pause here for a second. The awkward pause in the webinar waiting for someone.
I'm going to pop up. So I just click on ask the question here to pop that up.
Yes.
Will those be visible to everybody?
Yeah, you can do that too.
Cool.
Anything from the peanut gallery? Okay, active listening then.
Yeah.
Well, if you think of something while we're still talking, please don't hesitate, and we'll jump to that question.
I was also Dina, I could show off my partner's artwork here. So I'm in my partner's studio in our apartment. So this is the best place to record. So.
Oh, nice.
Of course, it's just green right now. I have no idea what's happening with it.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you have one other example you wanted to share, or do you want me to jump to another question?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely provide a couple more examples. So when I was working at National Geographic, one of the ways we actually used our community content was during our transition process. We were switching platforms from Google Plus to a new community platform powered by Higher Logic, and we needed a way to kind of preserve the content that was in that previous community, because it took too much time and too much energy for us to manually transfer all that content, which it turns out wasn't that big of a deal. Our members, because questions inevitably get repeated, going through that transition process, we thought we were going to lose a lot of things, but members just repeated the same questions, and folks who had answered the questions before popped back in. But what we were able to do with that old content was take it and put it into an ebook and pick out the best discussions and the best examples from the community, things that we really wanted to make sure got passed on to the next generation. And we put that into a document, and with all of the discussions, we included also on every page a little blank spot. We printed these out for some of our events, and they were also available electronically. But each of the pages also had a spot where you could actually write a response to the discussion from the old one. And then underneath that, we had the call to action. Make sure you go join the new community. Here's the link, and share your response with us. let us know what your answer is to this particular question. So that was a great way to use the content from our old community to really build a bridge between that old one and the new one. And then most recently, and this is something that a lot of associations are doing nowadays, especially if they have an existing community, is taking, using either, a volunteer module, if you have that through in your community or something like that, or even just putting out a call to action in your newsletter or something. Sending, asking members to respond to questions so that you can do like a member spotlight, to share and really, uplift the work that a particular individual is doing. That's what associations, that's like the bread and butter of associations also. We all know, that a big part of why members participate in our associations is so that they can also, express themselves as thought leaders in the industry. So yeah, those are definitely, just kind of like easy, low-hanging fruit that you can definitely pick from that content tree. So.
That's great. And I think that that spotlight issue is a good segue to a question that Steve just posted for us to consider. He asked if we had any examples of how to derive value out of the technical information that's often curated in professional community groups.
That's a really great question. This is where this kind of harkens back to my experience at Urmia with their journal. I was really able to, of course, I didn't understand a lot of it, but the the really in-depth, rich information that they were sharing with each other in the community, we were able to essentially leverage that. It took a lot of editing. In some cases, it's not something where you can literally just take a piece of or a discussion thread out of the community and just slap it into your journal. It's going to take a lot of editorial work to really tease out the important parts, and also in a lot of cases to make it digestible for other members. Because and I think you alluded to this earlier, Dina, that the information that our members can be sharing can be so detailed and so specific. It can be difficult for anyone to unpack it, even if you know the industry really well. That's why we're sharing that kind of stuff in a journal, is because it's arcane knowledge that needs to be shared, and it's not necessarily easy to understand. Otherwise, everyone would understand it already. So,
Right.
It's really a question. To get back to Steve's question, it's really a matter of taking those discussions and really giving an editorial eye to them. And one of the ways that I was able to do that with Urmia successfully was actually a volunteer who he was an emeritus member, and we knew he had contributed to the journal before, and so we knew that he had a really great writing style, and he was really good, a really good educator in general. So we actually reached out to him, and he had been working with us in other capacities as well. But he was he was the person who was our expert on staff. So we would say, we would get something from an expert who had posted in the community, and then we would send it to him and say, does this make sense? Is this understandable? And so it does take some time, but you can take these really in-depth conversations like that and really adapt them well for other formats.
Perfect. Great. Well, Steve, I hope that helped there. I'll just throw in one other idea. It wasn't specific to the community, but it was related to this technical content. I know that Courtney Ryers, who's a member of Content Forum at the American Society for Microbiology, shared that they were successful taking their journal articles and repurposing parts of them into blog posts or podcasts. And as you were saying, Luke, it makes some of the information more digestible. So not necessarily those expert microbiologists in that particular field, but they were making it explained in a way that other people could consume it. And that not only got them more content views by their members, it also got some exposure through SEO, just with the terminology that they were using it wasn't super scientific. So they were exposed to other audiences about the expertise of their members. So it had kind of a twofold benefit.
Yeah, and it's also a great way to make sure that you're meeting members where they are. Not every member has time to read a journal article.
Right.
They might not even subscribe to your journal, but they might be listening to podcasts and stuff like that. So, and then it also makes that it helps with content discovery. So if somebody does come into and listens to the podcast, and you mentioned that this podcast is adapted from a portion of our journal article, like go read the rest of it here and tell us what you think about it. There are so many opportunities to just kind of tease things apart, and a community is a great way to do that too. I think you can if you have a trusted group of volunteers in your community, you can share something like a journal article with them and say, what are the pieces that you think could come out of this that would make a really well-rounded blog article or a well-rounded podcast. And then, hopefully maybe they would even help you with that podcast. Maybe they would be the interviewee or something like that. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other examples that you can think of? I guess I'm thinking non-dues revenue kind of things, like, besides the journal, how can you productize some of the ideas that come out of the community for something a little more?
Yeah, that's a really great idea, or a really interesting question. And I was actually really excited to talk about this because I've been working on this with another client. Non-dues revenues every association is thinking about non-dues revenue from advertisements and sponsorships and things like that. And your community, once you've stood up that community, can be leveraged in the exact same way that you would leverage an event or a journal or even a newsletter, in terms of having sponsoring organizations, having advertisements that are displayed in your community. You can even do sponsored content. So I actually, you can also create gated communities that members actually have to pay for access to. And so I've actually, I believe you did a webinar recently with PRSA, and they're a great example of that. I'm a PRSA member, and they actually have, they're able to do this because their forums are very, very active. That's also a caveat here, but their forums are so active that they literally charge for access to them, especially for specialty forums. So I'm a member of their nonprofit and association forum, and it's an extra $15 or something, or $30. I think, on your annual dues, which is totally reasonable for what you're getting in terms of access to something like that. So you can think about it from that perspective in terms of an add-on. So I guess that is additional dues membership or additional dues revenue. But you can also think about it in terms of from the sponsor perspective. And this is something that I toyed with a little bit at Ermia as well. Is actually creating, so many of our sponsors and association supporters and consultants and things like that want to use the association's community to sell their services or to sell their product. And a lot of the clients that I work with, that's like the number one moderation issue that they have. It's like, we have a guy who won't stop selling his stuff in our community, and we need him to stop. And it's like, well, you can tell them, you can ask that person to stop, or in another case, you could set up a community that is strictly for product advertisements. Members could opt into that, and then if that guy wants to advertise to your members, he has to pay a certain amount to have access to that community and to do that. And then it creates a great opt-in opportunity for members who want to get information about products and services. Which that's definitely not constant. Sometimes you want access to that information, sometimes you don't. So kind of creating a gated space in your community for, your associate members to share that stuff, and then for your individual or other members to find it and discover it. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah. Wow. Those are all great ideas. I could see ASAE maybe taking advantage of some of that too, given some of the debates that happen on the community forums there, right?
Well, I think another really interesting kind of kind of evolution in online communities that I've started to see is actually, the development of hyperlocal opportunities. So, and that, who knows better about, chapters and local opportunities than associations.
Right.
And there are a lot of groups that are, they've evolved away from a chapter model, and so their members don't necessarily have those local connections that they used to have. And an online community is a great way to, preserve those kinds of local relationships with folks. So, I mean, you would think about it as like a meetup or a Nextdoor or something like that. You give, even if the association doesn't have a chapter in that area organizing things anymore, you can still leverage those volunteers who are excited about your association and excited about your industry to self-organize those things at the local level. And the online community is just a great tool to enable that, so that you can, you can say, here are the tools to be able to do all these amazing things you want to do. Just ask us for help if you need it, but otherwise, go and rejoice.
Right. Happy. That's great. Okay. Well, as I expected, the time is flying. We have just like 3 or 4 minutes left on the webinar. So I want to give folks one last chance to pop up any question that they might have in the chat that we can get Luke to answer for us while you're on the line. But in the meantime, as we're thinking about wrapping up, I went through some of the recent blog posts that you've been doing, Luke, and I think something that you said back at the beginning was underscored by a post I just read about letting your members tell you what they're looking for, rather than relying on your gut of what you think they're looking for. And you made the point that the best part is that at least a couple of the people that you talk to, when they post these ideas, will be willing to help you manifest those ideas or produce that content later, right? Because associations are that kind of connecting point that give people the opportunity again to be seen, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of, sorry, I'm getting feedback again here. That's just
okay.
That's the amazing thing about online communities is, especially if you do it really, really well, you're creating a space for your members to share their vulnerabilities, to share the things that are worrying them the most. And, if you can, I mean, I don't want to say that, a community manager is a therapist or anything like that. I think that is one of the hats that community managers have to wear.
Right.
You're really, just by showing that individual that you're willing to listen to them and that you value their opinion, they're going to be that much more willing to continue sharing with you. And, whether that's, just sharing more ideas or actually contributing to the work that's going to go into developing whatever product or piece of content that, they're recommending or suggesting, it's really about empowering those individuals to take action on your behalf, because no association has enough staff to do everything that your members need you to do. And so an online community is a great way to start that conversation with your members. It's a great way to say, hey, we want to share with you, but we also want to listen to you. We want to know what's important to you so that we can produce better products, better content, better results for you and for your organization and for your industry.
Right. Excellent. That's great. Well, Luke, again, I want to thank you for taking the time to share all the information that you did today. And folks online, thanks so much for joining and participating. I want to encourage you to go to Content Forum, the community that you're all a part of now, and post an article or put a post up about things that you might have learned today to share with others, or share some examples in the samples topic area of things that you used in your own community to cultivate content and feature your members too, so others can kind of see those examples. Luke, do you have any closing comments before we go?
No, I'm excited to see folks' examples, and yeah, definitely if you have any other questions, share them in the content forum. I'm going to be following up. I'd love to answer any other questions you have.
Awesome. Thanks very much. And thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thanks all. Thanks, Dina.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.